We've all met someone who always plays the victim by never owning up, always pointing fingers, and maybe you've even taken the fall for this kind of behavior from someone immature. The thing about this is that this is not only immaturity at its finest, it is a stage of ego development. Jane Loevinger's theory of ego development helps us understand why some people remain stuck in immature ways of seeing themselves and the world. And by the end of this video, you will not only have a full understanding of this developmental theory, but also why emotional maturity matters just as much as cognitive intelligence. Loevinger believed that our sense of self, which is our ability to understand ourselves, others, and the moral complexities of life, evolves through a series of stages, from impulsive and self-centered behaviors in early childhood to a fully integrated and authentic self in adulthood. Each stage builds on the last. But here's the key. Not everyone fully integrates these stages by adulthood or ever in their life, and that can have deep consequences. For example, think of someone who follows all the rules at work, but only because they're terrified of being judged. They're not being ethical, they're being conformist. Their actions are driven by fear of disapproval, not by personal values. Or consider someone who constantly needs to be the hero in every situation. On the surface, they seem confident, but they're actually stuck in a need to prove their worth, unable to accept their own vulnerabilities. In pop culture, we can see this in Michael Scott from The Office. He's the boss, but emotionally, he often acts like a child by seeking approval, avoiding conflict, and struggling to understand others' perspectives. Despite his position of power, his lack of ego maturity creates chaos around him. This video is part of a series that explains the bigger picture of human consciousness and the lines of human development as proposed by integral theory, developed by theorist and author Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber's integral theory provides a comprehensive framework for understanding the complexity of human growth. It integrates various lines of development, each one representing a distinct area of human evolution. These lines, from cognitive and moral growth and spirituality, shape how we experience and interact with the world. Wilber's approach emphasizes that these lines of development are interwoven and evolve simultaneously, influencing one another as we move through different stages of life. We've explored the cognitive lines of development, like Piaget's theory of cognitive development and Keegan's theory of constructive development. In those videos, we learned how cognitive structures evolve through different stages, each one building on the last, leading to a more sophisticated way of thinking and problem solving. In this series, we'll dive deep into these lines of development, from cognitive and moral growth to emotional intelligence and spirituality, based on the insights of different researchers. Ken Wilber's integral theory emphasizes multiple lines of development. Someone might be cognitively advanced, able to solve complex problems or debate abstract theories, but still emotional egocentric, unable to emphasize or take responsibility for their actions. Understanding the development of the self, as theorists like Jane Loevinger presented, is just as important as understanding how we cognitively think. Some adults still display emotional reactions and worldviews that seem stuck in earlier phases of growth, not because they lack intelligence, but because their ego or sense of self has not fully matured. Loevinger's ego development theory helps explain how people evolve in how they interpret themselves, others, and the world around them. Her model maps a journey from impulsive and rule-following behavior to self-awareness, empathy, and even inner transformation. Not everyone progresses through these stages. Life experiences like trauma, lack of emotional support, or even cultural conditioning can cause someone to get stuck at a stage that no longer fits their environment. And this is why someone can be intellectually brilliant, yet still emotionally egocentric, judgmental, or rigid in their thinking. In this video, we'll break down Loevinger's stages of ego development, look at how these stages shape how we see ourselves and others, and explore what happens when someone resists or avoids growth. I'll also use examples from pop culture to help illustrate these stages in action and help you recognize where you and others might be on this powerful journey of self-evolution. The very first stage of ego development, often called the pre-social or symbiotic stage, happens in infancy. At this point, there's no real sense of separate self. The infant's identity is completely fused with their caregiver. It's not officially part of Loevinger's scoring system, but it's considered the starting point of the ego's journey. In this stage, the baby doesn't yet distinguish between self and other. It just is. Loevinger's second stage of ego development is called the impulsive stage. Here, the self is ruled by immediate wants, emotions, and impulses. It's typically seen in early childhood, but some adults remain stuck here, acting without thinking, driven by raw emotions rather than reason or empathy. At this stage, people struggle with self-control and have difficulty seeing beyond their own immediate experiences. This mindset often shows up in people who lash out when frustrated or make reckless decisions without considering long-term consequences. They might seem charismatic or bold, but underneath, their actions are shaped by emotional reactivity rather than reflection. A perfect example of this is Tommy from Goodfellas. He's explosive, unpredictable, and dangerously impulsive. Whether it's reacting violently to a joke or making risky choices just to prove a point, Tommy operates from a place of unfiltered emotion. His failure to regulate his impulses isolates him from others and ultimately seals his fate. Loevinger's third stage is called the self-protective stage. At this level, people start to understand rules and consequences, but not because they believe in fairness or empathy. It's all about avoiding punishment and staying out of trouble. Their thinking is still self-centered, but now it's strategic. How do I not get caught? Rather than, is this the right thing to do? This stage is often marked by manipulation, blame shifting, and a basic understanding of cause and effect. It's the mindset of someone who follows the rules only when someone's watching, or who lies to avoid consequences, not because they believe lying is wrong. A classic example of this is Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter. Especially in the earlier films, he bullies others to boost his status, hides behind his father's influence, and often plays the victim when things go wrong. His morality isn't internal, he's just trying to avoid punishment and maintain control. That's the self-protective mindset in action. At the conformist stage, people begin to internalize the norms and values of their social group, but not necessarily because they've critically examined them. Instead, they seek belonging and approval. The world is seen in black and white, good or bad, right or wrong, based on what their group, culture, or community believes. This stage is about fitting in, following the rules, and maintaining harmony, even if it means suppressing one's own individuality or ignoring conflicting perspectives. People here often struggle with those who are different and may judge others harshly for not adhering to group expectations. A perfect example of this is Karen Smith from Mean Girls. She doesn't question the group's behavior or values, she just goes along with whatever Regina George says. Her identity and sense of right and wrong are shaped entirely by the social group she wants to belong to. That's the hallmark of the conformist stage, and we do often see this play out in middle school or high school. The self-aware stage marks a significant shift. For the first time, individuals begin to step outside the norms they were raised with and question them. They recognize that people have different values, different perspectives, and that these differences aren't always wrong, they're just different. At this level, people start to reflect more deeply on their own motives, emotions, and the complexity of life. They're more tolerant of ambiguity and begin to see that not everything is black and white. While they still seek approval and want to be seen as good or competent, they now have an inner voice developing, one that questions and evaluates the status quo. A great example of this is Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Early on, he blindly follows his father's commands, but as the series progresses, Zuko begins to question everything he was taught. He starts reflecting on what kind of person he wants to be, not just what others expect of him. This internal struggle and growing self-awareness are classic signs of someone moving through the self-aware stage. At the conscientious stage, people no longer rely on external approval or rigid rules to guide their behavior. Instead, they operate from a more internalized sense of responsibility and values. They begin to develop a deeper concern for truth, ethics, and long-term consequences, not just for themselves, but for others and society as a whole. This stage is marked by a capacity for true empathy, self-evaluation, and an ongoing desire to grow. People here can hold conflicting ideas without needing to resolve them immediately. They take accountability for their actions and strive to live in alignment with their principles, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Think of Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. He defends a black man in a deeply racist town not because it's popular, but because it's the right thing to do. He's guided by an inner compass rather than societal expectations. His commitment to justice, even in the face of hostility, embodies the integrity and moral depth of the conscientious stage. At the individualistic stage, people begin to appreciate the complexity and uniqueness of human experience. They recognize that truth is often subjective, shaped by different perspectives, cultures, and life histories. They recognize that different people have different perspectives, and that's not just acceptable, it's expected. Instead of needing one right answer, they become comfortable with ambiguity, contradiction, and nuance. This stage brings a new level of psychological insight. People here are more aware of their inner emotional lives, more accepting of contradictions within themselves, and more tolerant of differences in others. They start questioning previously held beliefs, even ones that served them well, in order to better understand the bigger picture. A great example of this is BoJack Horseman from the animated series BoJack Horseman. Throughout the show, BoJack becomes increasingly self-aware, not just of his flaws, but how his past, pain, and patterns affect those around him. While he still struggles, he begins to question his assumptions, own his mistakes, and reflect on what kind of person he truly wants to be. His journey is messy, but it reflects the individualistic stage's embrace of inner complexity and moral questioning. The autonomous stage is where individuals begin to further embrace complexity, contradictions, and emotional nuance. They no longer chase black and white answers because they understand that life is layered and uncertain, and that's okay. People at this level show a deep respect for others' autonomy. They can engage in close, interdependent relationships without trying to control, fix, or merge with the other person. They've developed a strong inner compass but remain open to feedback. Their sense of self is resilient, built not on rigid beliefs but on ongoing self-exploration. Emotional interdependence is welcomed, not feared. They recognize that true connection involves both giving and receiving, while still maintaining boundaries of self-awareness. Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings is a perfect example of the autonomous stage in action. Sam supports Frodo on their dangerous journey to destroy the One Ring, yet he doesn't lose himself in the mission or in his relationship with Frodo. Sam shows remarkable emotional interdependence. He cares deeply for Frodo's well-being, but never becomes so wrapped up in his own attachment that he forgets his own strength and purpose. Sam's ability to act with humility and self-respect while being emotionally supportive of others reflects the autonomy and emotional maturity seen in this stage. The integrated stage represents the peak of ego development in Loevinger's model. At this level, a person possesses profound self-awareness, emotional maturity, and a deep understanding of the human experience. They embrace the full spectrum of life, the joys and sorrows, the beauty and the pain, without needing to control or reject any of it. Integrated individuals don't just accept complexity, they embody it. They've made peace with their contradictions, no longer striving for perfection or rigid consistency. Their sense of self is fluid but centered, and they often live in service of deeper purpose, wisdom, or spiritual insight. Life becomes less about achieving and more about just being. A beautiful example of this is Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Having lived through war, loss, and personal transformation, Iroh becomes a quiet, powerful force of wisdom. He no longer seeks power or validation. Instead, he offers guidance, compassion, and presence to those around him. His serenity comes from a life deeply examined and deeply felt, making him a living example of the integrated stage. Loevinger's ego development theory gives us a profound understanding of how we evolve emotionally and psychologically over time. As we move through various stages, we shift from self-centered, simplistic views to more complex, integrated understandings of ourselves and others. These stages highlight how our sense of self and relationships with the world deepen, allowing us to tolerate ambiguity and engage with emotional interdependence without losing our sense of autonomy. However, not everyone progresses through these stages in a linear way. Many of us become stuck at earlier stages, which can limit our capacity to relate to others and navigate life's challenges. The good news is that growth is always possible, and the path forward is one of continuous self-awareness and integration. To evolve beyond earlier stages, it's important to actively engage in practices that encourage self-reflection. Mindfulness, journaling, and therapy can help you uncover unconscious patterns and deepen your understanding of yourself. Surround yourself with people who offer diverse perspectives and seek out experiences that challenge your assumptions. Dive into literature or teachings that expand your emotional and psychological range. The journey of ego development isn't about gaining more control over the world, but about increasing our capacity to hold complex, nuanced views of ourselves and others. By embracing these practices, you can transcend old habits and become more emotionally mature, making decisions from a place of greater balance and awareness. Be sure to subscribe for the next video in this series, where we'll explore more lines of development. And check out this video right here to dive deeper into related topics on spirituality, psychology, and how the world affects you. Thanks for watching.